think the former Speaker made a very articulate defence of why we should support institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, but I think also I wish that members opposite would apply that same logic to the free trade agreement that this government has sealed with China. I think this is something that will lock our two nations together in a pathway towards future prosperity, and if the logic of the former Speaker could be applied to all members when it comes to that agreement, I think that our country's future prosperity could be assured. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, I have spoken many times before in this place about our nation's changing economic profile, about the need to look beyond the farm gate or the mine head. If we are to continue the trajectory of almost a quarter century of uninterrupted economic growth, critical to the new order, our country's future economic prosperity will depend on our relationship with an emergent Asian middle class of more than 1 billion people. They want to buy our goods and our services, so it's imperative that we are opening ourselves to those markets and cultivating access for our exporters. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, for the Asia-Pacific to become fully realised as the 21st century economic powerhouse, one glaring deficiency must be not only addressed but prioritised. There is an acute shortfall in the region's funding reserves for major infrastructure, estimated to be as much as $8 trillion. With this bill, Australia openly declares its hand to lend a hand. We want to see the Asian economy get the fiscal injection it needs to grow. We want to create opportunities for the region and, by extension, Australia, through helping to fund transport, energy and water infrastructure, by investing in Asian ports, logistics, environmental protection, information and communications technology and agriculture. Mr Deputy Speaker, the reason is plain, unavoidable reality as much as any strategic drive. The current nexus between Australia's prosperity and economic growth and that of Asia will intensify to an almost unbreakable bond. A stronger Asia will underpin a stronger Australian economy. Infrastructure development in the region will provide greater opportunities for our businesses and increased demand for our services and commodity exports. Ultimately, a deeper relationship with a better equipped and more productive Asian economy means more jobs for all Australians. This bill, Mr Deputy Speaker, represents a significant step in mapping out that future, enabling Australia to become a founding member of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is expected to be up and running by the end of this year. This is a global multilateral initiative with more than 50 member nations involved. China is the largest of the bank's shareholders, with a 30.34% stake. Australia will have the 6th largest share. A contribution of about $932 million in paid-in capital to the AIIB over 5 years has been determined only after extensive due diligence and satisfaction that the bank will be based on world's best practice. The membership has drawn widely from inside and outside Asia, from South Korea to India to France, Germany and the United Kingdom. We are in very good company, Mr Deputy Speaker. And while there have been some reported concerns around governance, we have not lightly joined the newest international bank on the block. All members will absolutely be involved in the bank's direction and decision-making. Transparency will be key. Mr Deputy Speaker, the constructions of new ports and railways in AIIB member countries such as India, Indonesia and Korea will mean Australian exports can reach new and expanding markets. Building a coal unloader at an Indian port will create extra capacity for Australian commodity exporters. Constructing a new railway in Indonesia will help shift Australian wheat and beef to that market. The bank will also build roads and construct telephone and internet lines among a shopping list of infrastructure improvements. And I am in no doubt that the AIIB will fuel demand for the services which take up an ever-increasing share of our export market, and as such, our national wealth. In particular, we will see demand grow for the expertise we can offer in engineering and construction management, and finance and consultancy. Currently, the service sector represents about 80% of our domestic economy, but only 17% of our exports. Free trade agreements recently sealed by the coalition government will allow those service industries the unprecedented access to overseas markets that they need to grow. And that includes the landmark free trade agreement with our biggest trading partner, China, an agreement that is now built upon by Australia and Chinese founding membership in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Mr Deputy Speaker, with the tapering of demand for our resources and the swelling middle class of our Asian neighbours, services and the experiences can become the powerhouse industries, exporting to our region and employing our citizens. I am absolutely resolute in my conviction about this. And no greater opportunity exists than in the tech space. If Asia is to forge through the AIIB investment massive improvements in communication networks, we need to be there to capitalise on the explosion in innovative industries that will surely occur. We need to seize this moment now for our economy's future health, and I believe it is as stark as that. We need to foster a startup ecosystem of innovation which supports the next generation of entrepreneurs. Developing it will take a coordinated approach across government, the higher education sector, capital investment, and involve a real culture shift in this country. ABS data underscores how a new approach is needed by government to reverse a trend against risk and entrepreneurship, which is particularly worrying for young Australians. In 1997, 9% of employed Australians aged 15 to 34 owned their own business. By 2013, that number had diminished to just 8.3%. But in the right environment, young Australians will find the confidence to start their own businesses, grow the economy and create thousands of new jobs. The nation has the fundamental components with deep reserves of young, bright, talented Australians and other young international entrepreneurs set to be lured to our country by our unique lifestyle. And finally, we are perfectly placed at the heart of growing Asia, which is the focus of this bill, to become an epicentre of global entrepreneurship. A startup economy, a PricewaterhouseCoopers study commissioned by Google Australia, showed that high-growth technology companies could contribute 4% of GDP, or $109 billion, and add 540,000 jobs to the Australian economy by 2033 from a base of only 0.2% today. In a recent speech to the Australian Institute of Company Directors, the CSIRO chairman and former Australian of the Year, Simon McKeon, spoke passionately about a new innovation culture that should permeate business and government. He encapsulated it as an essential change in mindset, attitude and culture. While entrepreneurial spirit has always been accepted in Australia, now it needs to be championed by government, which must set up as part of a collaboration with business, science and education. Our chief scientist, Ian Chubb, agrees, pointing out that while Australia has the same proportion of research scientists per capita in the workforce as the United States, only a third of them are in the private sector. In the US, the opposite applies, with a premium in innovation, commercialisation and entrepreneurship. In Israel, we see what is achievable. A small country under constant threat, with no natural resources, it produces more start-up businesses than Japan, India, Korea, Canada and the UK. And it claims more companies on the NASDAQ than Korea, Japan, Singapore, China, India and all of Europe combined. Successful governments stir an infectious entrepreneurial spirit, building direct partnerships with the private sector that attracts capital for the commercialisation of great ideas. Put simply, they have made it as easy as possible to start and run a new business. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank will show us what's possible, for it will work to the very same principles, harnessing private sector investment and co-funding projects with other development banks and private sector financiers. As the Treasurer enunciated in his second reading speech, this is not a development bank, but a bank that funds development. Australian companies will be able to bid for AIIB finance projects as the bank will have an open procurement model. But while it is vital investment, our AIIB commitment will not, Mr Deputy Speaker, come at the cost of other government spending. There will be no direct impact on the budget bottom line. Mr Deputy Speaker, nobody can deny that Australia faces many challenges into the future. However, I believe we should be infinitely optimistic about our potential for prosperity, not because of the resources we have in our ground, but in light of the innovative capacity of our people. If we embrace our cultural heritage of having a go, if we look not in but out to our regional neighbours for the prospects of growth, theirs and ours, we will, as the new Asian middle class rises, be in a position to meet its demand for our food, education, health and innovative and entrepreneurial services. Our Asian neighbours will see doors open as a result of new and enhanced infrastructure across the region. They will walk through them to us. They will want to travel here and invest in our services. Their prosperity is our prosperity. That is the future, Mr Deputy Speaker, which is why I wholeheartedly support our membership of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and this bill to implement our obligations under the bank's Articles of Agreement. I commend the bill to the House.